Jake Morrison stared out the small window of the Starbound and felt his stomach twist into knots. The space station ahead looked like a giant metal wheel spinning slowly in the darkness. Lights blinked along its surface like tiny stars. This, was it? First contact with an alien race. You nervous? Danny Walsh asked, floating up beside him in the zero-gravity corridor. His friend's face looked pale under the ship's white lights. Me? Nervous? Never, Jake lied, trying to sound calm. His hands were shaking a little, so he shoved them into his pockets. Captain Lisa Torres called from the bridge. Morrison, get up here. We're docking in 10 minutes. Jake pushed off the wall and floated toward the front of the ship. The bridge was small but packed with screens and blinking lights. Captain Torres sat in the center chair, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked serious, like always. You ready for this? She asked him. As ready as anyone can be for meeting lizard people, Jake said. My translation program is loaded and running. I've read all the files on their language. Dr. Amy Collins looked up from her tablet. Remember, Jake, these aren't just lizard people. The Vorthak are a military empire. They've conquered 12 star systems. They're dangerous. Great. No pressure at all, Jake muttered. The ship shook slightly as it connected to the space station. Jake could hear the metal clamps locking into place. His job was simple: translate between human and Vorthak languages during the meeting. What could go wrong? 20 minutes later, Jake found out exactly what could go wrong. The meeting room on the space station was huge and cold. The walls were made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Jake sat at a long table with Captain Torres and Dr. Collins. Across from them sat 3 aliens that made Jake's heart race. The Vorthak looked like dragons that had learned to walk on 2 legs. They had black scales that caught the light like oil. Their eyes glowed amber in the dim room. The biggest one sat in the middle, and Jake couldn't stop staring at him. This had to be Warlord Zethkar. He was at least 7 feet tall, even sitting down. His shoulders were broad enough to block out the lights behind him. He wore armor that looked like it was made from black metal and red gems. Spikes stuck out from his shoulder guards. A long cape flowed behind his chair. But it was his face that made Jake's mouth go dry. Sharp teeth showed when he spoke. His amber eyes seemed to look right through Jake like he was reading his thoughts. Scars ran along his jaw and forehead, old battle wounds that made him look even more dangerous. The human delegation is welcome, Zethkar said in a deep voice that rumbled like thunder. His accent was thick, but Jake's translator made the words clear. Captain Torres nodded. Thank you for meeting with us, Warlord Zethkar. We hope this can be the start of peaceful relations between our peoples. The Warlord's eyes moved to Jake. You are the one who speaks our language? Yes, sir, Jake said, trying not to stutter. I mean, the computer helps, but I've studied your language for months. Interesting. Zethkar leaned back in his chair. The other 2 Vorthak, who Jake guessed were generals or something, watched him carefully. Tell me, human, what do you think of the Vorthak Empire? Jake felt sweat on his forehead. This wasn't supposed to be part of the plan. He was just supposed to translate, not answer questions. Well, you've built something impressive. 12 star systems is no small thing. And what do you think of me? The question hit Jake like a punch. Everyone in the room was staring at him. Captain Torres had a warning look in her eyes, but Jake's brain was already moving faster than his common sense. He looked at Zethkar again. The fancy armor, the cape, the way he sat like a king on his throne. The gems and spikes and metal that probably cost more than Jake's entire ship. And those amber eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Honestly, Jake said, his mouth running before his brain could stop it. With all that fancy gear and the way you carry yourself, you'd make a pretty wife. The room went dead silent. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. What had he just said? Dr. Collins dropped her tablet. Captain Torres looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. The 2 Vorthak generals stared at Jake like he had just grown a second head. But Zethkar was smiling. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile a shark might have when it saw a wounded fish. His teeth looked very sharp in the dim light. Did he just... One of the generals started to say. He did, Zethkar said softly. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath it. The human has issued a bonding challenge. A what now? Jake squeaked. Zethkar stood up, slowly. He seemed to grow even bigger as he rose. His armor clinked and rattled. The cape flowed around him like dark water. When he reached his full height, he towered over the table like a mountain. In our culture, he said, his amber eyes locked on Jake's face, to call a warrior a pretty wife is to challenge them to the bonding rite. You have proposed marriage through trial of combat. Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish. What? No, that's not... But Zethkar was already moving. He walked to a panel on the wall and pressed something. Red lights began flashing. A loud alarm started ringing. Heavy metal doors slammed shut over all the exits. Security lockdown activated. An electronic voice announced. Captain Torres jumped to her feet. Now wait just a minute, this is clearly a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Zethkar said. He turned back to face Jake, and that shark smile was bigger now. Your human has accepted the ancient laws. The trial begins now. 2. More Vorthak soldiers entered through a door Jake hadn't seen before. They were almost as big as Zethkar and looked just as dangerous. They moved toward the human delegation. Jake, Dr. Collins whispered, what did you just do? Jake stared up at the massive alien warlord who was still smiling down at him. The amber eyes seemed to glow brighter now, like fires in the darkness. Jake had made a lot of mistakes in his life, but this one might be his last. I think, Jake said slowly, I just proposed to the scariest alien in the galaxy. Zethkar's laugh was like rumbling thunder. Indeed you have, little human, and I accept. Jake had never been on an alien spaceship before. He decided he didn't like it. The Crimson Talon was huge, dark, and cold. The walls were made of the same black metal as Zethkar's armor. Red lights cast strange shadows everywhere Jake looked. The air smelled like metal and something he couldn't name. Maybe alien sweat or fear. He sat on a hard bench in what the Vorthak called guest quarters. It looked more like a prison cell to him. The walls had no windows. The door had no handle. On the inside, the only furniture was the bench he sat on and a small table with some kind of alien food on it. The food looked like purple paste and smelled worse. Captain Torres paced back and forth like a caged animal. Her boots clicked on the metal floor. This is insane, she said for the 10th time. We can't let them keep Jake. We don't have much choice, Dr. Collins said quietly. She sat at the table with her tablet reading everything she could find about Vorthak culture. Their laws are very clear. Jake issued a bonding challenge, and Zethkar accepted it. I didn't issue anything, Jake said. I made a joke, a stupid joke. A joke that might get you killed, Dr. Collins said. She didn't look up from her tablet. Or worse? What's worse than being killed, Jake asked. Being kept as a trophy slave if you lose the trials, she said. And according to this, no one has ever beaten Zethkar in a bonding challenge. He's defeated 43 challengers from different species. Jake felt his stomach drop. 43? The good news is that most of them survived, Dr. Collins said. The bad news is that they're all slaves now. Captain Torres stopped pacing and slammed her fist on the wall. There has to be a way out of this. Diplomatic immunity, cultural misunderstanding, something. Not according to Vorthak law, Dr. Collins said. Once a bonding challenge is issued and accepted, it must be completed. The only way out is through the trials. The door made a loud clunking sound and slid open. Jake jumped up from the bench. 3 Vorthak soldiers stood in the doorway. They wore simpler armor than Zethkar, but they still looked dangerous. Their amber eyes glowed in the red light. The human Jake Morrison will come with us, the middle one said. His voice was rough and deep. Where are you taking him? Captain Torres demanded. To meet with Warlord Zethkar. He wishes to explain the trials. Jake's legs felt weak. but he forced himself to stand up straight. "It's okay, Captain. I can handle this." "No, you can't," she said. "But you're going to try anyway, aren't you?" "Do I have a choice?" The Vorthak soldiers led Jake through long corridors filled with red light and shadow. Other aliens moved through the halls, all of them big, all of them scaled, all of them looking at Jake like he was something interesting they'd never seen before. Some of them had different colored scales, green, brown, dark red. But they all had the same amber eyes and sharp teeth. They stopped at a large door decorated with symbols Jake couldn't read. One of the soldiers pressed his hand against a panel and the door slid open. Zethkar's quarters were nothing like Jake expected. He thought it would be all weapons and trophies and scary things. Instead, it looked almost comfortable, soft. Lights replaced the harsh red ones. The walls were covered with books, actual paper books, which surprised Jake. A large desk sat in one corner, covered with papers and what looked like star charts. Zethkar stood with his back to the door, looking out a large window at the stars. He had taken off his armor and cape. Without them, he looked smaller, still huge compared to Jake, but more like a person and less like a walking nightmare. He wore simple black clothes that showed the powerful muscles in his arms and shoulders. "Sit," he said without turning around. His voice was quieter than before, but still deep. Jake sat in a chair that was too big for him. His feet barely touched the floor. "So," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "About those trials." Zethkar turned around. Without the armor, Jake could see his face more clearly. The scars were still there, but his amber eyes didn't look as frightening. They looked tired. "Do you know why I have never taken a mate?" Zethkar asked. "Because you keep challenging people to combat?" Jake guessed. "Because no one has ever been strong enough," Zethkar said. He moved to his desk and sat down across from Jake. "In Vorthak culture, strength is everything. The strong lead, the weak follow. A leader's mate must be strong enough to stand beside them as an equal." "And you think I'm strong?" Jake laughed, but it sounded nervous even to him. "Have you seen me? I'm about as threatening as a wet paper bag." "Strength comes in many forms," Zethkar said. "Physical strength is only one kind. There is also strength of mind, strength of will, strength of spirit." "Great. What are these trials like?" Zethkar leaned back in his chair. "3 trials. First is combat. You must face me in single battle. Second is strategy. You must command a fleet against me in simulated warfare. Third is survival. We must both survive together on a hostile world. And if I lose? If you lose all 3 trials, you become my property. If you win at least 1 trial, you earn the right to refuse the bonding and leave freely. If you win all 3 trials?" Zethkar paused. "No one has ever won all 3 trials. What happens if I do? Then I become yours to command." Jake stared at him. "That doesn't sound very likely." "No," Zethkar agreed. "It does not." They sat in silence for a moment. Jake looked around the room again. The books on the walls caught his attention. "You read a lot?" "Knowledge is another form of strength," Zethkar said. "I have studied the histories and cultures of many worlds." "Including Earth?" "Yes. Your species is interesting. Most races we encounter fall into predictable patterns: warriors, merchants, scholars, farmers. But humans seem to be all of these things at once." "We're complicated like that," Jake said. "Your Captain Torres, for example. She is clearly a warrior, but she also shows great concern for her crew. Most warrior leaders care only for victory." "She's good people," Jake said. "So is Dr. Collins. And Danny. He's my best friend. He's probably planning some crazy rescue mission right now." "The one with the weapons training?" "How did you know that?" "I make it my business to know about anyone who might try to rescue you," Zethkar said. "Your friend is brave but foolish. This ship has defenses he cannot imagine." Jake felt a chill. "You won't hurt him, will you?" Zethkar studied Jake's face. "You care about your friends." "Of course I do. Most challengers care only about themselves. They see the trials as a chance for personal glory. Zethkar leaned forward. Why did you really make that comment about me being a pretty wife? Jake felt his face turn red. It was just a joke. A stupid joke. You looked so formal and fancy with all that armor and ceremony. It reminded me of a bride at a wedding, all dressed up and decorated. I wasn't thinking. Humans make jokes when they are nervous? Some humans do. I do. It's a bad habit. It is an interesting habit, Zethkar said. Vorthak do not make jokes during serious situations. Maybe you should try it sometime. Might help you relax. Zethkar's mouth twitched slightly. Jake thought it might have been almost a smile. Perhaps. When do you wish to begin the trials? Do I have a choice? You may take time to prepare. Study our combat methods, learn our strategies, train your body and mind. How long? As long as you need. I am patient. Jake stood up. The chair was really too big for him. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why haven't you just conquered Earth already? You've got 12 star systems and a big scary military. We've got one planet and ships that are held together with hope and duct tape. Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. Because conquest without honor is meaningless. Your species intrigues me. I wish to learn more before deciding your fate. And now I find myself curious about what you will do in the trials. Zethkar stood up too. Even without his armor, he was huge. Return to your quarters. Think about what you have learned. The trials will begin when you are ready. As Jake walked back through the dark corridors, escorted by the same 3 guards, he thought about what Zethkar had said. The alien warlord wasn't quite what he had expected. Dangerous, yes, powerful, definitely. But there was something else there too. Something that almost seemed lonely. Back in the guest quarters, Captain Torres and Dr. Collins were waiting for him. Well, Captain Torres asked. I think, Jake said slowly, this is going to be more complicated than we thought. Jake spent 3 days preparing for the trials. Dr. Collins taught him basic first aid and how to treat injuries. Captain Torres showed him military tactics and strategy. Danny tried to teach him how to fight, but that went about as well as expected. Ow, Jake said, picking himself up off the floor for the 5th time. This isn't working. You're not trying hard enough, Danny said. You have to be aggressive. I'm not an aggressive person, Danny. I tell jokes and translate languages. I don't punch things. You're going to have to learn, Captain Torres said. The first trial is single combat, against a 7-foot-tall alien warrior who's never lost a fight, Jake pointed out. I don't think 3 days of training is going to cut it. Dr. Collins looked up from her tablet. Actually, Jake, you might have an advantage you don't realize. What kind of advantage? Vorthak combat is very formal, very traditional. They have rules and honor codes, but humans, we fight dirty when we have to. You want me to cheat? I want you to survive, she said. Use your brain, not your muscles. On the 4th day, Zethkar came to get Jake personally. He wore his full armor again, black metal and red gems, spikes and cape. He looked like something from a nightmare. Are you ready? He asked. No, Jake said honestly. But let's do this anyway. The combat arena was a huge room with walls that could change and move. Right now it looked like a rocky landscape with hills and caves. Weapons hung on racks around the edges. Swords, axes, spears, and things Jake didn't recognize. Choose your weapon, Zethkar said. Jake looked at the weapons. They were all too heavy for him. The smallest sword was longer than his arm. Can I choose not to die? That is not a weapon. It should be. Zethkar made that rumbling sound that might have been laughter. Choose human. Jake picked up a short spear. It was still heavy, but he could lift it. Zethkar selected a massive sword that looked like it could cut a tree in half. The trial ends when one of us yields or cannot continue, Zethkar said. Do you understand? Yeah. Try not to kill me too quickly. I will try. The fight began badly, for Jake and got worse fast. Zethkar moved like lightning despite his size. His sword cut through the air where Jake's head had been a second before. Jake rolled behind a rock and tried to think. Fighting fair wasn't going to work. Jake was smaller, weaker, and slower, but he was also more flexible and, maybe, smarter. He waited until Zethkar came around the rock, then threw dirt in his eyes. While the alien was blinking and cursing, Jake stabbed him in the leg with the spear. It didn't do much damage through the armor, but it surprised him. Interesting, Zethkar said, wiping dirt from his face. Jake ran. He scrambled up a hill and hid behind another rock. Zethkar followed, but Jake was ready. He had loosened some rocks at the top of the hill. When Zethkar got close, Jake pushed them down. The rocks bounced off Zethkar's armor, but one hit his sword hand. He dropped the weapon and shook his fingers. Jake jumped down from the hill and grabbed the sword. It was too heavy for him to swing properly, but he could hold it. Yield? He asked hopefully. Zethkar smiled. Then he grabbed Jake by the shirt and threw him 20 feet. Jake hit the ground hard and rolled. The sword went flying. His shoulder hurt, and his head was spinning. Zethkar walked over and picked up his weapon. "You fight like no one I have ever faced," the alien said. "Dirty, unpredictable, clever, I approve. Does that mean I win?" "No." Zethkar raised his sword. Jake closed his eyes and waited for the end. Instead, he felt the flat of the blade tap him gently on the shoulder. "But you have earned respect," Zethkar said. "The first trial is complete. You lose, but you fought with honor in your own way." Jake opened his eyes. "I'm not dead?" "Not today." The second trial took place on the ship's bridge. Jake and Zethkar each sat at a command station controlling simulated fleets in a holographic battle. Jake had 30 ships. Zethkar had 30 ships. The goal was to destroy the enemy fleet or capture their command ship. "This should be fun," Jake muttered, looking at all the controls. He had studied the basics with Captain Torres, but this was way more complicated than anything he'd seen before. Zethkar's fleet moved in perfect formation, lines of ships advancing together like soldiers marching. It was beautiful and disciplined and very, very Vorthak. Jake looked at his own fleet. 30 ships against 30 ships. Traditional tactics said to meet the enemy head-on with your strongest formation. But Jake wasn't traditional. He split his fleet into 6 groups of 5 ships each. Then he sent them in completely different directions. "What are you doing?" one of the Vorthak observers asked. "I have no idea," Jake said honestly. Zethkar's fleet kept advancing in formation, heading for where Jake's main force should have been. But Jake's main force wasn't there anymore. It was scattered all over the battle space. 2 groups of Jake's ships attacked Zethkar's fleet from the sides. While Zethkar turned to deal with them, another group attacked from behind. When his ships turned to face that threat, the first 2 groups attacked again. "He is fighting like a coward," one observer said. "He is fighting like a human," Dr. Collins said quietly. She was watching from the side with Captain Torres and Danny. Jake's ships were smaller and faster than Zethkar's. They couldn't win in a straight fight, but they could run away and attack again from a different direction. Jake kept his fleet moving, never staying in one place long enough for Zethkar to pin them down. It was like fighting with a swarm of angry bees. Every time Zethkar's ships tried to engage, Jake's ships would scatter and regroup somewhere else. "This is not honorable combat," General Vexthul said. He was one of the aliens who had been at the first meeting. "This is not combat at all," another observer agreed. "This is chaos." But Zethkar wasn't saying anything. He was studying Jake's movements, trying to predict where the human ships would attack next. Jake could see that he was frustrating the alien warlord. Zethkar's ships were getting spread out as they tried to chase Jake's forces all over the battlefield. That's when Jake saw his chance. He gathered 4 of his groups together and attacked Zethkar's command ship directly. While most of the alien fleet was scattered across the battle space, the command ship only had a few defenders left. "Impossible," General Vexthul said. Jake's ship surrounded Zethkar's command vessel. The battle was over. The hologram shut down. The room was very quiet. Jake could hear his own heart beating. Zethkar stood up slowly. His amber eyes were bright with something Jake couldn't read. "You win," the alien said. "I win?" Jake couldn't believe it. "I actually win? You fought without honor, without courage, without tradition?" General Vexthul said angrily. You ran like a frightened animal. And yet he won, Zethkar said quietly. His tactics were effective. My fleet was defeated. But the way he fought was brilliant, Zethkar finished. I have studied warfare for 100 years. I have never seen anything like this. He turned my strength against me. He made my discipline into a weakness. Jake felt a strange mix of pride and terror. He had actually beaten Zethkar at something. But the alien didn't look angry about it. He looked interested. The second trial is complete, Zethkar announced. The human wins. The trials are now equal. 1 loss, 1 victory. What's the third trial? Jake asked. Survival. Tomorrow, you and I will be transported to the surface of Kethmore, a world we use for training our warriors. We must survive together for 3 days. If both of us live, the trial is a success. If one of us dies, the other loses. Wait, Jake said, together, not against each other. Together, Zethkar confirmed. The third trial tests not your ability to defeat me, but your ability to work with me, to trust me and earn my trust in return. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the look in Zethkar's eyes when Jake had won the fleet. Battle. It wasn't anger or embarrassment, it was something else. Something that almost looked like respect. And tomorrow, they would be alone on an alien planet together. Just him and the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy. Jake stared at the ceiling of his quarters and wondered if he was brave enough for what came next. Outside his window, the stars looked very far away. The planet Kethmore looked like Earth's idea of hell. Red sand stretched in every direction under a burning orange sky. Strange plants with thorns as long as Jake's fingers grew in twisted shapes. In the distance, he could see mountains that looked like broken teeth. Lovely vacation spot, Jake said, adjusting the breathing mask over his face. The air was breathable, but smelled like sulfur and death. Zethkar stood beside him, no longer wearing his fancy armor. Instead, he had on simple leather clothing and carried a basic pack of supplies. Without all the metal and gems, he looked more like a person and less like a walking weapon. This world has many dangers, Zethkar said. Poisonous plants, predatory animals, extreme weather. We must work together to survive. Great. What could go wrong? They started walking toward the mountains. Jake's human legs were shorter than Zethkar's, so he had to work hard to keep up. The red sand was soft and made walking difficult. Sweat ran down his face inside the breathing mask. Tell me about your homeworld, Zethkar said as they walked. Earth? What do you want to know? Everything. Your people fascinate me. Jake thought about it. It's a blue world, lots of water, green plants instead of these thorn monsters. We have cities with millions of people living together. Mostly we get along, though we argue a lot about silly things. And your family? My parents live in a small town. They run a restaurant. Nothing fancy, just good food and friendly service. Jake smiled under his mask. My dad makes the best pancakes in 3 counties. You miss them? Yeah, I do. Jake looked at the alien walking beside him. What about you? Do you have family? Zethkar was quiet for a long time. I had a brother once, younger than me. He died in battle when I was still learning to lead. I'm sorry. It was long ago. But yes, I miss him too. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. The landscape slowly changed from flat desert to rocky hills. Jake's legs were getting tired, but he didn't complain. Zethkar could probably carry him if he had to, but Jake wanted to pull his own weight. As the day went on, Jake noticed something strange. Zethkar kept looking at him, not in a threatening way, but like he was trying to figure something out. Can I ask you something? Jake said during a rest break. Yes. Why did you really accept my challenge? You could have just laughed it off or had me arrested for insulting you. Zethkar sat on a rock and looked out at the red horizon. Because in 100 years of life, no one has ever surprised me the way you did in that meeting room. By insulting you? By making me laugh. Zethkar turned to look at Jake. Do you know how long it has been since anyone made me laugh? Jake thought about it. Too long? Much too long. Being a warlord is a lonely existence. Everyone fears you or wants something from you. No one simply talks to you like you are a person. You are a person, Jake said. A big, scary, alien person, but still a person. Your species sees individuals where mine sees only rank and function. It is refreshing. They found shelter for the night in a cave that smelled like old bones. Zethkar built a fire while Jake gathered dry plants for fuel. The flames cast dancing shadows on the cave walls. Tomorrow we reach the dangerous part, Zethkar said, checking his weapons. This wasn't the dangerous part. This was the easy part. Tomorrow we enter hunting grounds of the Kethar, creatures that make our warriors' training very challenging. What do they look like? Imagine your earth wolves, but larger, with claws that can cut through metal and pack intelligence. Jake felt his stomach drop. Oh good. Giant smart wolves. My favorite. That night, Jake dreamed about home. He dreamed about his parents' restaurant and Danny's terrible jokes and Dr. Collins explaining science to him. He dreamed about Earth's blue, sky and green trees. He woke up to Zethkar shaking his shoulder gently. Quietly, the alien whispered. We have visitors. Jake could hear them now, low growling sounds coming from outside the cave. Lots of growling sounds. How many? Jake whispered back. Too many to fight. We must be clever. They gathered their supplies in silence. Jake's hands were shaking as he packed his gear. Through the cave entrance, he could see shapes moving in the early morning light. Big shapes with glowing eyes. There is a back entrance to this cave, Zethkar said quietly. We can escape that way, but we must move carefully. They crept through the dark cave, feeling their way along the walls. Jake tried not to think about what would happen if the Kethar found them. Behind them, he could hear the creatures entering. The front of the cave. The back entrance was a narrow crack in the rock barely wide enough for Jake to squeeze through. Zethkar had to remove his pack and push it through first, then follow. His broad shoulders barely fit. They made it outside just as angry howls echoed from inside the cave. The Kethar had found their sleeping spot. Run, Zethkar said. They ran through the rocky hills as fast as Jake's human legs could carry him. Behind them, more howls joined the first ones. The pack was hunting now. This way, Zethkar said, leading Jake up a steep slope covered with loose rocks. Halfway up the slope, disaster struck. A rock shifted under Zethkar's foot. The alien warrior, who had seemed so strong and unstoppable, fell hard and cried out in pain. Jake stopped running and looked back. Zethkar was lying on the rocks, holding his leg. His face was twisted with pain. Go, Zethkar said through gritted teeth. Save yourself. Jake could see the Kethar coming up the slope behind them. Big creatures with silver fur and teeth like daggers. Their eyes glowed yellow in the morning light. Jake looked at Zethkar, then at the approaching predators, then back at Zethkar. Not a chance, he said. He grabbed Zethkar under the arms and tried to help him up. The alien was heavy, but Jake was stronger than he looked. Dr. Collins had taught him about injured people during his training. Your leg is broken, Jake said, checking the injury. But I can make a splint. There is no time, Zethkar said. They are almost here. Jake looked around frantically. Above them, the slope continued up to a narrow ledge. If they could reach it, the Kethar might not be able to follow. Can you climb if I help you? Jake, leave me. This is not your fight. Yes, it is. We're in this together, remember? Jake found 2 straight pieces of rock and used his shirt to tie them to Zethkar's injured leg. It wasn't pretty, but it would help. Then he got under Zethkar's arm and helped him stand. Lean on me, Jake said. We're getting out of here. Climbing the slope with an injured alien twice his size was the hardest thing Jake had ever done. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned. But he kept going, one step at a time. Behind them, the Kethar were getting closer. Jake could hear their claws scraping on the rocks. They reached the ledge just as the first predator lunged at them. Jake kicked loose rocks down at it. and the creature fell back with an angry howl. The ledge was safe. The Kethar tried to climb up, but the rock was too smooth and steep. After a while they gave up and wandered away to find easier prey. Jake and Zethkar lay on the ledge, breathing hard. "You saved my life," Zethkar said quietly. "You would have done the same for me." "Yes. But you did not know that. You chose to help an enemy who has threatened to make you a slave." Jake sat up and looked at the alien. "You're not my enemy. I don't know what you are, but you're not my enemy." Zethkar stared at him for a long moment. "No other challenger has ever risked their life for mine. Maybe that's because you never gave them a reason to care about you. And you care about me?" Jake thought about it. "Yeah, I guess I do. Is that weird?" "Very weird," Zethkar said, but he was smiling when he said it. They spent the rest of the day on the ledge, talking and resting. Jake learned about Zethkar's childhood, his rise to power, his dreams of building something better than just another military empire. Zethkar learned about Jake's family, his fears, his hope that someday humans and aliens could be friends instead of enemies. As the sun set over the red desert, Jake realized something had changed between them. They weren't Challenger and Warlord anymore. They were just two people who had survived something dangerous together. "The trial is over," Zethkar said as night fell. "We have both survived. What happens now?" "Now we return to my ship, and you must make a choice." "What kind of choice?" Zethkar looked at him seriously. "Whether you wish to complete the bonding ceremony or return to your people." Jake stared at him. "You mean I can leave? You have won one trial and completed another successfully. By our law, you have earned the right to refuse the bond, and if I stay, then you become my mate and partner. An equal voice in how the Vorthak Empire is ruled." Jake looked up at the alien stars in the orange sky. A few days ago, his biggest worry was translating a diplomatic meeting. Now he was being offered a chance to help rule an interstellar empire. "That's a big decision," he said. "Yes," Zethkar agreed. "It is." Jake never got to make his choice about the bonding ceremony. When they returned to the Crimson Talon, everything had gone wrong. General Vexthul met them at the docking bay with a squad of armed soldiers. His amber eyes glowed with anger and something else. Ambition. "Warlord Zethkar," he said with fake respect, "you have been gone too long. The fleet has concerns about your condition." "What condition?" Zethkar demanded. He was leaning on Jake's shoulder because of his injured leg, but his voice was still strong. "Your weakness for this human has made you unfit to lead," Vexthul said. "The Empire needs strength, not sentiment." Jake felt Zethkar tense beside him. "You dare challenge me? I dare save the Empire from your poor judgment," Vexthul replied. "Guards, arrest them both." The soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and an announcement echoed through the corridors. "All ships, battle stations. Enemy fleet detected." Vexthul smiled coldly. "My fleet. While you were playing house with your pet human, I was gathering support from other warlords. Half the Empire stands with me now." "You planned this," Zethkar said. "I planned to remove a weak leader and claim what should have been mine long ago." Vexthul turned to his soldiers. "Take them to the detention cells." Before the guards could move, Danny Walsh came sliding down a maintenance shaft in the ceiling and landed hard on one of the soldiers. Jake had never been so happy to see his best friend. "Miss me?" Danny asked, pulling out a weapon he'd taken from the fallen guard. "How did you—" Jake started. "Dr. Collins hacked their security system. Captain Torres is fighting her way to the bridge. Time to go." Chaos erupted in the docking bay. Danny was good with weapons, but they were outnumbered. Jake helped Zethkar toward cover behind a supply crate. "Can you fight?" Jake asked. "Not well," Zethkar admitted. "My leg." "Then we need to be smart instead of strong." Jake looked around. The docking bay, ships, supplies, weapons, fuel tanks, and an idea formed in his mind. "Danny!" he called. "Fuel leak now." Danny understood immediately. He shot one of the fuel tanks, and flammable liquid began spraying everywhere. The Vorthak soldiers backed away from the dangerous spill. "Everyone out!" Jake yelled. "This whole bay is about to blow." It was a bluff. The fuel wouldn't actually explode unless someone did something really stupid. But the Vorthak didn't know that. They retreated toward the exit. Vexthul snarled in frustration. "Find them! They cannot escape!" But Jake, Danny, and Zethkar were already moving through service corridors toward the bridge. Dr. Collins met them halfway, looking excited and terrified at the same time. "I've been monitoring their communications," she said. "Vexthul has 20 ships. But there's something else. He's not just planning to take over the Vorthak Empire. He wants to attack Earth too." "What?" Jake felt cold fear in his stomach. "He thinks humans are a threat because of what you did in the trials," Dr. Collins explained. "He wants to destroy Earth before we can spread our dangerous ideas to other species." Zethkar cursed in his own language. "I will not allow this." "How do we stop him?" Danny asked. "We need to reach Captain Torres," Jake said. "If we can get control of this ship." They fought their way through corridors filled with Vexthul's supporters. Danny's weapons training helped, but it was Zethkar's knowledge of the ship that got them through. Even injured, he knew every passage and shortcut. They found Captain Torres on the bridge holding off a group of rebel soldiers with Dr. Collins's stun weapon. "About time," she called when she saw them. "I've been trying to send a warning to Earth, but they've blocked all communications." "Can you break through?" Jake asked. "Not from here. We need to get to the main communications array." "I know the way," Zethkar said, "but we will have to fight through Vexthul's entire force." Jake looked at his friends, Captain Torres with her determined expression, Danny with his ready smile even in danger, Dr. Collins with her brave heart despite her fear. Then he looked at Zethkar, the alien warlord who had become something more than an enemy. "I have an idea," Jake said. "But it's crazy." "Crazy is what we do best," Danny said. Jake turned to Zethkar. "Can you broadcast a message to your entire fleet?" "If we reach the communications array, yes, but why?" "Because I'm going to challenge Vexthul to single combat." Everyone stared at him. "Jake," Captain Torres said carefully, "that's not crazy. That's suicide." "Maybe. But think about it. Vexthul is using Vorthak law to justify his rebellion, right? He says Zethkar is weak and unfit to lead, so I challenge that claim." "You cannot fight Vexthul," Zethkar said. "He is a trained warrior." "I don't have to win," Jake said. "I just have to make a point. How many of your people actually support Vexthul, and how many are just following him because they think you're weak?" Zethkar understood. "If you face Vexthul with courage, it proves that I have not made you weak. It proves that humans have strength worth respecting." "Exactly. And while everyone is watching the fight, you can send that warning to Earth." It took them an hour to fight their way to the communications array. When they got there, Jake's plan almost fell apart immediately. Vexthul was waiting for them with a dozen soldiers. "How predictable," the rebel general said. "You come here to call for help like frightened children. I come here to call you a coward," Jake said loudly. "I challenge you to single combat." The soldiers looked shocked. Even Vexthul seemed surprised. "You? A weak human challenges me?" "That's right. You claim Zethkar is unfit to lead because he respects humans. Prove it. Fight the human who supposedly made him weak." Vexthul laughed, but Jake could see calculation in his amber eyes. "Very well, when I kill you, no one will doubt my strength. And when I prove you wrong," Jake said, "your rebellion dies with your reputation." Vexthul was bigger than Zethkar and meaner looking. His scales were dark green instead of black, and he had more scars. When he drew his sword, Jake's mouth went dry. But Jake had learned something in his trials with Zethkar. Sometimes being small and weak was an advantage if you were smart about it. The fight was broadcast to the entire fleet. Jake could see other ships on the viewing screens around the communications bay. Thousands of Vorthak were watching. Jake didn't try to fight fair. He threw things at Vexthul, used the environment to his advantage, and generally fought like Captain Torres had taught him. To win, not to look good. When Vexthul charged, Jake dodged, and the alien crashed into a control panel. When the general swung his sword, Jake ducked under it and kicked him in the knee. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. "Fight like a warrior," Vexthul snarled. "I am fighting like a human," Jake replied. "That's the point." The fight went on for 10 minutes. Jake couldn't win, but he didn't lose either. He kept moving, kept thinking, kept proving that humans weren't weak, just different. Finally, Vexthul cornered him near the main communication console. The general raised his sword for a killing blow. "Any last words, human?" "Yeah," Jake said. "Duck." Zethkar's sword came flying through the air and knocked Vexthul's weapon from his hands. The rebel general spun around to face his former leader. "Your leg," Vexthul started. "Is fine," Zethkar said, stepping forward without his improvised crutch. "Dr. Collins is very good at healing." The two aliens faced each other. This fight was shorter and more brutal. Zethkar was angry about the betrayal and the threat to Jake. Vexthul was desperate and off balance. When it was over, Vexthul lay unconscious on the floor. Zethkar stood over him, breathing hard. "The rebellion is over," he announced to the fleet. "Any ship that wishes to leave may do so. Any ship that wishes to stay will follow new laws. Laws that include respect for all species, including humans." Over the next few hours, most of Vexthul's supporters surrendered or fled. The Idine threat to Earth was ended. Jake managed to send a message to his parents telling them he was safe, but the biggest change was still to come. 3 days later, Jake stood in the same room where he had first met Zethkar, but this time, it was decorated with flowers from a dozen different worlds. Captain Torres, Danny, and Dr. Collins sat in the front row wearing their best uniforms. "Are you sure about this?" Captain Torres asked. Jake looked at Zethkar, who was wearing ceremonial robes instead of armor. The alien looked nervous, which was strange to see on someone usually so confident. "I'm sure," Jake said. "Besides, someone has to keep him from conquering innocent planets." "I heard that," Zethkar said. "You were supposed to." The ceremony combined human and Vorthak traditions. Jake's parents attended by video link from Earth, looking bewildered but happy. Zethkar's military officers stood stiffly at attention, still adjusting to the idea of their leader marrying a human. When it was over, Jake was officially the mate of the most powerful warlord in the galaxy. More importantly, he was the partner of someone he had come to care about deeply. "So what, now?" Danny asked at the reception. "You going to rule the galaxy?" "Hardly," Jake said. "I'm going to help change it. Make it a place where humans and aliens can work together instead of fighting." "Think it will work?" Jake looked across the room at Zethkar, who was trying to explain human humor to a group of confused Vorthak generals. Dr. Collins was showing alien scientists her medical techniques. Captain Torres was discussing strategy with Vorthak commanders. "Yeah," Jake said. "I think it will work." 6 months later, Jake stood,